All right, so here is our next theory, and this is face negotiation theory, which falls in line with the interpersonal theories, the one on one styles of communication that you might choose to explore. Face negotiation theory. This is really a theory that helps us to explain more or less different cultural differences in response to conflict. So, while yes, it is in fact a one on one interpersonal theory, we could also take a look at it as an intercultural theory as well. Now, it's important that we flesh out a few terms before we dive into this theory, and the first is culture. Culture has a lot of really broad, even vague meanings across communication studies, but in this theory, when we take a look at culture, we're really thinking about things like race, ethnicity, one's nationality or nation where they were born, the differences in gender and sex, gender as being cognitive, right? Sex as being biological, age, and certainly other demographics that we could think of as cultural as well. Now, as the name suggests, face negotiation theory, face then really becomes a metaphor for what our public self image is like. In other words, it's sort of how we want other people to see us and treat us. So it is the face that we put forward. It is the outward face of ourself that the public then gets to experience. Face work, then, is another term that's very important to this theory. And face work is the work, the verbal and nonverbal messaging, the performance of verbal and nonverbal communication patterns that help us then to either maintain, restore, maybe even honor or uphold a certain face that we would like the public to understand, appreciate, and acknowledge about us. Now, again, that'll sort of unfold as we take it just another step further. So, first, I want you to think of this from, again, that cultural perspective, right? People who are from individualistic cultures, for example, the United States, will engage in different types of face work, different types of behaviors to uphold a public image than individuals who might be from a collectivistic culture. And a textbook example of a collectivist culture is China, right? So take a moment and maybe Google or look up some definitions for individualism and collectivism. And then here's some ways in which you can think about how the cultures would vary in terms of projecting a public image, right? Let's say, for example, that you are from an individualistic society and you're working on a team, maybe at your job, and your team did a really great job. They met their sales quota, and now it's time for a promotion. Now, let's say that you actually did 90% of the work in that group. Would you expect that only you got the promotion, or that you got 90% of the promotion, giving the rest of the 10% to divvy up in your team, or that you would all receive the same exact amount when it came to the promotion? Well, the way in which we would then go about using verbal and nonverbal communication during that moment would be telling of the ways in which we came from either an individualistic or a collectivistic background. Now, if you're anything like me, I definitely subscribe to individualism, and if I did all the work, I want all the payment. But individuals from a collectivistic society might see it as an opportunity to really take care of one another in a different way, honor the face of their work group, right? The public image of their work group. And in that way, they would all share the benefits equally. You could think about that too in terms of grades, right? Students used to complain all the time when I would do group assignments or group works, group projects, group presentations, and they would say, yeah, but are we going to be graded individually or as a group? Because the idea among students, at least the feedback I received, is that group grades tend to be unfair given the ways in which workloads vary from student to student. And I'm sure that you can think of other ideas that maybe come to mind as we're talking about this. Now, it's an important thing to stop and pause, thinking about that 2/3 of the world's people come from collectivistic cultures and societies. So the ways in which they negotiate, engage in conflict, do business, peacekeep, problem solve, make decisions for one another really comes from the space of collectivism. Okay, and that collectivism identity is really a we identity instead of a me identity, or an us them. We could look at it as well. In a we identity, every single individual decision truly does affect the group. And so when it comes time to make a decision, the group values and needs are really, really weighed heavily into the equation versus an us them orientation, where individualistic or collectivistic societies differ, right? In that the us them creates sort of a dichotomy or a competition, so to speak, one that we might be a little bit more used to. And US society, again, really embraces that idea where every person is unique, everybody is individual, everybody carries their own workload. You can achieve your dreams by doing your own work, but you certainly don't need to take on the works of others. They are, in fact, responsible for that. So here's that conflict part, getting back to that interpersonal piece here. Let's say that a major mistake was made at work amongst a team of your employees, right? And you know that it wasn't your fault, the mistake that was made. Still, it was a member of your team who committed the error. Now your boss comes to you and questions you about it. This is very different from the one in which you're all getting a promotion, isn't it? Here's one where there's some face saving, some face work that needs to be thought about. So in this situation, whose face would you save? In other words, would you save yourself, right? Would you tell your boss, look, it wasn't me. I know who it was and I'll correct their behavior, but you need to know that I wasn't the one responsible. Well, 1/3 of the world would agree with you if that was your choice and adopt that orientation. However, 2/3 of the world might agree with those of you who said, actually, I wouldn't. I would uphold what would be a more perhaps honest, some might suggest, or even an altruistic yours, right? And in that way, you would be saving the face of your group. Now, there is a middle ground, and that's called mutual face or mutual face work. And that's when the individual shares equal concern for both parties and wants to really uphold the public images of both. And in that way, that's an ours rather than a me, mine, you, yours. And in this way, it considers the relationships involved and the longevity of those relationships as well. So here's a little bit more on conflict. How we manage our face, ours, yours, others, really varies depending on different conflicts that we're in, right? In some situations, it might be best to save our own face. And in those instances, we would be doing things called face restoration behaviors. How do we restore our face when there's been a crime committed, so to speak? Versus face giving, which is when you defend someone else and their need for inclusion, their need for honoring and acceptance and the like. And so this really plays into research around conflict styles. Now, if you're familiar, maybe you've taken COMM 2, an argumentation class, or conflict styles in general, there are in fact 5: avoiding, obliging, compromising, which many consider to be the worst form of conflict style, dominating, and integrating. Now, for more on this, there's definitely a reading, and perhaps I'll talk more about conflict styles later. But you can, just by their names alone, imagine how each one of these conflict styles play out, right? Avoiding conflict altogether, maybe being more passive-aggressive, compromising, nobody really gets what they want, and both try to find some awkward middle ground where neither party is really happy, dominating, and the like. So this is really a theory for you and your project if you're looking at any sort of cultural differences and how cultural differences play out in social settings or even one-on-one. Also, if you're looking at different modes of conflict, so avoiding, again, being aggressive, passive-aggressive, obliging, compromising, dominating, or integrating both of your needs and wants in order to come up with a conflict resolution. Also, if you think that your topic or your project has anything at all to do with power distance, how maybe a culture deals with certain hierarchies or forms of status and power, going back to those work examples and looking at how conflict and power are transmitted up a chain of command. But also, let's say if you wanted to study communication mindfulness, groups and inclusion, ways in which we use one-on-one personal conflict to in or out group members. and the like. Oh, don't skip ahead. That's it for this one. Thanks so much.